Okay, so what's the starting point for any discussion around a defined benefit pension? What's the thing I have to be thinking about in order to understand everything else about the pension? Well, that's helpful, but it's not gonna, I've got to get to the benefit, right? So the 2% will get me to the benefit, okay? But I've always got to think about the benefit. So go to the benefit, work from there, okay? Always, always, always the benefit, and we have the benefit here. In fact, two of the numbers you see in my little green box at the top right corner here are the benefit, right? So I have the annual benefit entitlement here, and I have the benefit after 35 years of employment here, okay? So I need the benefit always, always, always. All right, now that being said, it is important to understand how these are funded. So how do we pay for this whole thing? Well, we already know that our plan member is kicking in some dollars to make this thing work, okay? But really what we're going to have, and I think Sean predicted what's about to happen here, is we're going to have a plan member. It's kind of the case, Bonnie, yeah? Or at least it can be if we don't do it right, okay? So we're going to have our plan member, and we're going to set a normal retirement age. Now, this is pretty common. We're going to talk about early retirement later on, but we're going to set a normal retirement age, which is usually 65. I can do other things. That's not the only thing that I can do, but we're going to leave it at 65. Okay. Do we have a calculator up on the screen here? Everybody see my calculator? Good stuff. Okay. So here's what I know based on Sean's draw a line. So if this person is 65, now we're not going to use an age 94 or 95 or whatever the case is mortality assumption here. I'm going to use a mortality assumption based on roughly 50% of the population. Okay, so I'm going to use age 89 here. This is different from what you would do in a financial planning scenario, right? We remember this from, say, the Pearl exercise back in chapter 5, where we used Pearl at age 96, if I remember right. Okay, and the reason that we're using age 89 here is because we're not actually figuring out what one person needs. We're not solving an income problem for Pearl. What we're really figuring out here is if I have, whatever it is, 700 retirees, how much do I have to have on average for those 700 retirees? So this is where I can get away with using an average mortality figure. I don't have to go and use a fairly conservative figure. Okay, everybody's with me there? So my line here is going to be 24 years long. And during that 24 years, this person has to be paid $43,680 per year. Okay, that's all good? All right, and then I need to use an IY, okay, and that's going to be an actuarial, what we call discount rate. I had promised we would look at discount rates later in the course, and here they are. So when we talk about a discount rate, it's a rough proxy for a rate of return, but it's not exactly the same thing, okay? When we use the term discount rate, what it really means is how much am I discounting tomorrow's dollar by compared to today's dollar. And 3.5% is a pretty good stab at this thing. You might actually find some pensions that are using 3.5%. I do want to just show you something though, before we get too far with that. And that is, it's going to depend on the promises that the pension makes. Okay, that's good, Todd, I like it. So if the pension is indexed to inflation, or if the pension is not indexed. this is going to have a big difference on my discount rate. Which of these would you rather have as the plan member? You would rather have the indexed pension, right? Okay, so if you're trying to meet the promise here, okay, if you're not the plan member now, but you're the actuary who has to meet the promise, which of these would you rather have? You don't want to have to fight that indexing battle, right? So would you agree there's less pressure on the plan if it's a non-indexed pension? Would everybody agree with that? Okay, so if it's an indexed pension, we're going to use a rate somewhere around 3%. Okay, we use 3%. Well, sometimes, Todd, that's all you get. Okay. Now, what we really see today, and this goes back to the New Brunswick thing, so you can talk to Mark out in New Brunswick about this, but what we see a fair bit of today is the loss of full indexing. So lots of pensions today are going to have a best efforts or a partial indexing instead of full indexing. Okay. All right. If the pension is not indexed, we're going to use a figure somewhere around 5%. Okay, and you can really think of the 3%. This is kind of like a real rate of return. Remember way back in chapter 5, we did real rate of return, and we're going to do this again in chapter 14, where we said if you have to account for inflation, you're really going to knock that inflation off of your rate of return. Okay, so does everybody see this, why I would use 3% for an indexed benefit and 5% for a non-indexed benefit? Effectively, with the indexed benefit, I could get the same investment returns, but I have to take some of those and put them back into the pension to keep up with inflation. Okay, so effectively, what I'm doing here is I'm reinvesting, let's say 2% to keep up with inflation. So it's not really available to meet the pension promises. Okay, that's good. What's the future value of this pension? So the future value is going to be 0. There's going to be nothing left at mortality. Now, I will amend that in a minute. We're going to work through this, and then I'm going to introduce a little bit of reality, and you're going to see that this is more complicated even than what we're about to do. Okay. What I'm actually trying to solve for here, I'm trying to fund the pension, right? So if I'm trying to fund the pension, I'm trying to figure out the present value, exactly. So present value is what I'm going to try and solve for, okay? So now, going way, way back to our fundamentals of time value of money. Okay, this is my set of unknowns here, and we can go through and do this up. So, so really, I'm going to do PY and CY at 1, okay? I could do 12. I could do CY at 12, take the pension divided by 12. It's probably a little bit more accurate, so sure, let's do it that way. My times PY is going to be 24. IY, we'll do 3% first. We'll do the indexed first. My present value is going to be what I'm going to compute. My payment is going to be 43,680 divided by 12. And my future value is going to be 0. That's good. So 3640 of monthly payment. Okay, now can I go and solve it? Are we ready? Do we want the other calculator here? There. Okay, so should be about right. Oh, still have to do my stupid decimals again. All right. Okay, so we're going to do PY at 12 and CY at 1. Oh, that didn't go for some reason. PY at 12 and CY at 1. Okay, and then 24. Oh, well, we'll get it right away here. 3 into our IY spot, 3640 into payment, 0 future value, and compute present value. That's pretty close. All right. Oh, you must have been on begin, Todd, eh? Something like that. So at 3%, so for an indexed pension, we're going to have a present value. That's fine. Mike, you still got 749, didn't you? It's 749, 862. I would have considered it positive. It's coming to you, right? It's coming to the plan member. Although I guess if you look at it from the actuary's perspective, it's a negative. So whichever. All right, nothing to be fussy about. So then that's if we're indexed. If we're not indexed, then all I'm going to do is change my IY. So we're going to do 5% now for a non-indexed pension. Okay, and that's going to be IY, and we're going to compute our present value. Okay, so not surprisingly, I hope it's not surprising, I need more money to fund an indexed pension than I do to fund a non-indexed pension. Does that make sense?
It's strange that we use a bigger number for the non-index as a percent versus the other one. But I guess you're taking out more money. Is that why?
You're taking some of the investment returns you make and putting them back into the investment, right? You don't have, if you're, in both cases, you're making 5% or whatever the number is. Let's say it's 5%, right? If I don't index the pension, I can use the full 5% to pay the plan members, right? Whereas if I index the pension, I have to take some of that 5% and invest it back into the plan. Okay.
Jason?
Yes, Melania.
Did you just say that it costs more money to fund non-index, which, I mean, makes sense?
Nope. It costs more money to fund the indexed pension, right?
Costs more to fund the indexed pension.
So my actuary or my plan sponsor has to have about $750,000 set aside if the pension is indexed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And only $616,000 set aside if the pension is not indexed.
Okay, I guess where I'm a bit confused is you're really just taking like the 2% off of the, like, to me, I'm looking at both scenarios without seeing the result and thinking it comes out to the same. I don't know. This is very confusing to me.
So is it going to be easier to fund, ignore pensions for a second, Melanie, just in general. You have a client who comes to you with a retirement need, right? And the client says, client A says, I need $10,000 a year, flat,
Mm-hmm.
That'll be enough. Maybe they're making mortgage payments at $10,000 a year. You with me?
Yeah.
And client B comes to you and says, Melanie, I got to pay my rent. My rent is going to go up every year with inflation, right?
Mm-hmm.
This year, my rent is $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two different needs, aren't they?
Yep.
So which of those people is going to need more money to meet the obligation they've got.
The guy whose rent is increasing.
So really what's happening with that guy whose rent is increasing, again, let's assume that in both cases, and I know this isn't perfect in that scenario, but let's assume in both cases, you know you can invest for them and get 5%.
Mm-hmm.
So really, the mortgage payer, you're going to take all of their returns and kick it out to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the renter, you're going to take some of their money, you're going to put it back into the investment. So they don't get full access to their returns. They have to take some of it, put it back into the investment so that you can continue to generate income at the rate they need.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so
Okay,
there's more pressure on the indexed plan, right?
I have to say something because I know what she's thinking. I would be still confused. The way I look at it is this: the client needs X amount of dollars per month. So the amount that he's getting is $3,640 a month. So if the client had a 5% rate of return on that, how much money do you have to set aside versus if they got a 3% rate of return, how much you would have to set aside to pay out $3,600 every month? So it makes sense. If it's 3%, you're going to have a way bigger amount of money because it's only really generating 3%, like you said, because 2% is going back in for inflation. But just thinking about it as the pool, this pool is going to be a lot smaller because you're taking out 5% every year to get that payment. So yeah, this would be a smaller amount and the indexing would be a bigger amount. That's how I make it work in my head. So
yeah, it's funny you should say that because as he was explaining it, I had worked out the scenario in my head that you just explained, and I
know
That's why I wasn't really
because we think because some of us think differently, I think, on this. So, but I got it. So okay, I'm glad I helped.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. Yeah, that's a fair analogy too, Sean. You're right. The cash, I have to, so the non-indexed, right? That person only has to put 3640 out next year. The indexed is going to have to put out 3640 times 1.02 or whatever inflation is. Okay. And by the way, you'll never see a pension plan with negative inflation. Okay. So if inflation happens to be, which I think is fairly likely now for 2020, a negative number, you still won't see your pension benefits decrease. Okay. All right. It's a lot of pressure, Mark, isn't it, to manage that CPP pool? Okay. All right. I mean, it's a decent job, that's true. Okay. Are we good there? Now, what do we see today, just in general, in terms of commuted values? So when we think about the value of pensions today, how do they look compared to historical norms? Those of you that have done pension transfers, what do you see? Oh, lower than when, Todd?
Higher if you're commuting the value out.
Yeah, if you're taking commuted values, they're at all-time highs, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. But the pools, in some pools, are lower. That's what I meant to say.
So I would suggest some pools are underfunded, which doesn't necessarily mean they're lower. Yes, that's a different question, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say now, just for the sake of being able to do this calculation right now, where we have all this on the board, let's say that today I go to my plan sponsor and I get a commuted value estimate. Okay. So today, yeah, that doesn't surprise me, Ryan. I'm not at all surprised at that, actually. Okay. So today I go to my plan sponsor and I ask for a commuted value. And the calculation, it's not perfect. I'm going to correct my math here in a minute, but it's going to be roughly what I'm showing you in these two numbers. Okay. Now, let's say this person is age 57. Well, really, then it's going to be the present value of the age 65 benefit. Everybody with me there? So I'd have to do a present value back 8 more years to get that commuted value. Okay, and we can do that in a minute. In fact, we will. Okay, but let's say the person doesn't retire. Okay, they don't retire and they decide to work another year. And in that year, let's say rates fall by 1%. Okay, and so then at age 58, we get the commuted value again. So which way have interest rates gone? They have fallen. What happens to fixed income prices when rates fall? Goes up, right? So what's going to happen by extension to our commuted value here, Melanie? Or anybody? So that's going to go up, right? We're going to get a higher value. So now we can solve again using, let's say, 2%. Okay. So now if we plug 2% into that IY spot and recompute our present value, exactly as Melanie suggested was going to happen here, we're now going to see that value bumped up to $833,000. This is a real thing that happens. Okay, I don't know if anybody on the call has had this experience, but when you have clients who kind of dance around, should I take my commuted value or not, or they get an estimate today, and then they come back 3 months or 6 months or 12 months later, if interest rates have moved during that time, you can get a significantly different value. You see here, this is $83,000 we just added to the value. Everybody's with me there? So yeah, the underfunding of pensions does happen to some extent, Philip, you're right, because people take out their commuted values, but it also happens because pensions, honestly, pensions are in a tough world today. Fixed income returns are next to non-existent, and pensions have to have a certain portion of their assets by legislation in fixed income assets. It makes, and they have to stay reasonably liquid in order to meet the promises to their plan members. It becomes exceptionally difficult to meet those promises. And that's where it's not a surprise at all when Ryan says, you know, I have a client who went to get their commuted value and the plan sponsor said no, because the plan sponsor presumably doesn't have enough. It's not that there's not enough money in the pension, it's that there's not enough liquidity there to meet the promise. Okay, so that's fair. Now, Sean, just hang on to that thought for a second. Okay, we're going to come back to commuted value. Okay, I want to show now the real funding question. Okay. Oh, really? I'm surprised. I didn't know Canada Post was that rough, Ryan. All right. It's not been that long since I saw a Canada Post commuted value. So, okay. So now that one, Ryan, is okay. It's a tax, ultimately it's taxpayer backed, right? So fair that you're probably not going to get commuted values there, but I would be shocked if we saw Canada Post employees having to take a big pension haircut. Okay. No, I'm not suggesting that's okay. Not at all. I still remember the days of Alberta teachers. Remember this, Ryan? In about 1990, what would it have been? No, more recently than that, 2005, thereabouts. Alberta teachers' pension was underfunded by about $9.5 billion. Remember that? And the taxpayer made that up. Okay, Cam remembers that. Yeah, and on the other side, the federal prison guards. Anybody have a client who's a federal prison guard? So the federal prison guards pension had a surplus of about $4.5 billion. And in about 2010, the federal government said, hey, that's a good deal. We don't you don't need a $4.5 billion surplus in your pension. And they took it and essentially gave it to the taxpayer. Okay. All right. Good. So we get different versions of this. All right. Yeah, ask a prison guard about it sometime, Cam. Okay. Because they really funded that surplus. So the actuarial calculation is actually a little more complicated than this, because what we really have here, I treated this as if it was one draw a line exercise, but that's not what it is. It's really the present value of a bunch of pensions, okay? And we also have to take into account survivor benefits. We have to take out Ryan's clients who take their stupid commuted values. We have to take into account early retirement. Okay, so there's a bunch of these sort of unknowns that show up in this calculation, and that's where the draw a line thing doesn't work. Instead, we have to use the formula we use for the intrinsic value of an option. Instead, we're going to solve using the Black-Scholes formula. So just so you recognize that you're not doing the same math that an actuary is doing. It's a rough estimate, but the actuary is going to use Black-Scholes, which is a way to calculate the value of uncertainty based on the likelihood of that uncertainty. That's good. So the actuary who's doing this is going to figure out how many people are going to die at each given age, and then how many of their spouses are going to die at each subsequent age, and how much survivor benefit has to be there to calculate or to fill that promise as well. That's good. So it ends up being quite a bit more complex calculation. All right. Now, whatever the formula is, we don't really care that much. The point is that now the plan sponsor knows that they have to have whatever it is, $750,000 per employee who meets these criteria available when those employees are 65. Is that fair? Is that about right? So if it's Canada Post, this is exactly what Ryan is referring to with this underfunded problem. So Canada Post, for example, knows that they only have 80% of that promise available. Now, the reality is today, a lot of pensions are in an underfunded situation just owing to current market events. So they get a little bit of latitude with this. However, about 3 or 4 years from now is when we should see plan sponsors back properly funded. Now, this is true for what we call a single employer pension plan. In fact, there are many pension plans that don't fit that criteria. What is very common is what's called a trusteed plan or a multi-employer pension plan. And these are very common in public sector pensions. So you'll find this is true for teachers and healthcare. You see a lot of this here. And what happens is several hospital or municipalities, that's the other one you see it in. Okay. And what happens here is we get a bunch of hospitals. So every hospital in Ontario belongs to HOOP, for example, the Healthcare Workers of Ontario Pension Plan. And what happens then is every hospital isn't doing the actuarial calculations. So HOOP does the actuarial side, and then the plan member might pay, if we're using their numbers up above here, the plan member pays roughly $7,626. Okay, and remember that was that 9% and 11% funding. Remember that? And then the hospital that the employee or that the plan member works at might pay, let's say, 10% up to YMPE and 12% over YMP. I don't know what the exact funding model is for HOOP today, but it's actually pretty close to that. Okay, we could go to the HOOP website and check it. Doesn't really matter. The point is that in this multi-employer or this trustee plan, we're expecting the employer to put enough money in with the plan sponsor to make the thing work. That's good? Yeah, exactly, Cam. Yeah, LAPP here in Alberta, the local authorities pension plan, and the management equivalent, the management employees pension plan, are exactly this kind of plan. Yeah, and in fact, Cam, their funding models are very similar. LAPP today is doing actually 10 and 12 for employees, and I want to say 11 and 13 for municipalities. I think that's right. Okay, that's good. Okay. Yeah, and it's very normal with those sort of alphabet soup pension plans, right? That's generally what that means. Those alphabet soup pension plans are usually multi-employer pension plans. They don't represent one entity, they represent a whole bunch of them. Okay. Any questions there? Okay, I'm going to erase some of this. And we're going to talk a little bit about commuted values. Okay, so let's say this is all true now. So now we've added a couple of bits of information over here. We have an indexed pension. And we know the present value at 65 has to be $749,000. Sorry, 749,862. Okay, so keep fleshing that out. And now what I'd like to know, let's say that we are trying to figure this out, this commuted value at age 57. Is that something that we actually, oh no, might have to solve for? I think I just messed something up. You still have my calculator up on the screen? All right, good stuff. Okay, so how would I figure out what that commuted value is? Well, how about I draw another line? Isn't this all it is? So all I'm going to do here, I say, well, I know that the value at age 65 has to be $749,862. Okay, I know that's what has to be there. Yeah, so Todd, the assumption here is if this person is 57, right? They started at 22 and they have 35 years from that point. They're now 57, right? So that's 35 years. With me here at $1,248 a year of benefit entitlement. That's good. So we know this is all true. Okay, perfect. So then we're looking 8 years out, and we're once again going to use that 3% discount rate. Payment is going to be 0 here. We're not putting any more money into the plan. You've already worked your 35 years. And then we're going to solve our present value. Okay. And that's going to give me my commuted value. So I can just pop over to the calculator. And we can do that same bit of math here, a little bit simpler. This time we're going to do, not that it really matters here, but 12 and 1 in our CY and PY. We're going to say that's 8 years out into the future. We've got 0 payment. Oh, I missed my discount rate at 3%, and $749,862 of present value. We can compute our future value. So the plan, yeah, perfect. The plan needs to have today $591,948 available at age 58 to fund this person's retirement. Okay, that's very, very close to what your actuary would spit back for commuted value. That is the amount if you leave the plan and take your, we'll say, cash instead of staying for the pension. Okay, this, by the way, would be the same type of calculation that you would do for a division of matrimonial property. Or for a survivor's benefit. If you die before pension benefits start. Once pension benefits start, then this is a significantly different outcome for that survivor's benefit. Okay, is everybody with me there? All right, so now I'm just going to pop up to my green box in the top right corner, which I keep filling in. And we're going to plug in the commuted value at age 57. So we started work at 22, and our commuted value at 57, we said was 591,948. Okay. So, no, I don't think so, Bonnie. Why do they have their commuted value at the mid-40s? Did they just ask for it out of curiosity? I would really suggest, if they're going to keep working there, is that the plan? They're going to keep working? Yeah, so if they're going to keep working there, what you really should do is figure out what the pension benefit will be at 57, right? So you're going to do the same type of calculation we did essentially on the last page. You figure out, and then you figure out the commuted value from there. But the commuted value from today, there's not some easy future value calculation to turn that into the commuted value in 15 years. Because that person is still working there, right? Sure, but in most cases like that, you can take your commuted value potentially, but you have to give up your job, right? Okay, and there'd have to be some reason to have that concern. So yeah, I wouldn't make an equation here where if the company is in trouble, the pension plan is necessarily in trouble. Those two things don't necessarily match up, okay? If you get a Sears scenario where Sears deliberately stopped putting money into its pension, fine, but I have no idea about the coal mine in Stony Plain, okay? That's good. You with me? So that's where you'd really have to look at, again, information from the plan sponsor. Yeah, Nortel did the same thing, Philip. Nortel deliberately wasn't putting money into their pension. Yeah, so that's a fair point, Todd. When you have a company that makes that wholesale switch, and Canada Post is kind of playing around with that, I guess, now, then employees will have the choice to take their commuted value and turn it into their DC value. Yeah. Okay. But again, that's not something that you'd see in a normal circumstance. That's typically a once in a company's lifetime scenario. All right. Are we still good? No, I'm not suggesting normal. That's fair. But still, you could only really make that change once in your company's life cycle. Okay. But you are more likely to see those questions, certainly when people are going through changes. That I agree with. All right. Yeah, which is why we have to learn all these stupid mechanics, right, Todd? Right? We can't just say, hey, this is one pension, run with it. You really have to be able to dig in to the pension to be able to help make those proper recommendations. Okay, can I erase everything on this screen? Here goes then. Okay, so I'm going to show something that's mathematically, oh, I'm not going to be able to answer those. Honestly, no, that's not how this works. All right. I don't mind answering questions periodically. It's all good. Okay. But yeah, I think that I'll have to come up with a new pricing model if we do that. So, okay. So I just want to show something, and this might not be intuitive, but I think once you see it, you'll be okay. So we know that at age 57, we need $749,000 to fund this thing, right? That's how much we need. Basically, the other thing that we know, okay, is that for each year of service, oh, sorry, at age, let's see, age 65 amount. Okay, so for each year of service, okay, I don't know, Bonnie. All right, for each year of service, we're looking at something like this, okay? Basically, every year that you work, your pension is growing by, or this person's pension is growing by $1,248, right? Every year of employment looks like this, assuming that you're paying this benefit starting at normal retirement age and ending at mortality. That's 24 years. That's good. And we're going to use that same 3% discount rate. Okay, all good? So really, every single year that you work, the company has to have that much more money put away to fund that pension. Is that fair? So yeah, and I'll show you in a second here, Melanie. Let's do a little bit of math here, and then I think it'll be easier to see. So I'm going to do over the same thing, just in the interest of consistency here. It's going to be 24. IY is going to be 3. Present value is what we're going to compute. Payment is going to be 1248 divided by 12. So that's going to be $104. Future value is going to be, yeah, I absolutely agreed, Melanie. That's not really what I'm asking you here. Just hang on to that thought for a second. So future value is going to be 0. Okay. So let's solve that, and then I'll come back and I'll explain what I've done here. And I could have done a different order, but you'll see this, I think, right away here. So again, my PY and CY, 12 and 1, that's good. We're funding this promise for 24 years. That's 288. I got an IY of 3, $104 of payment, 0 future value, and compute my present value. So basically, if this person worked here for only 1 year, okay, they would have a pension. Now, I know you really can't do this, but they would have a pension of $1,248 a year, or $104 a month, starting at age 65. Would you agree with that? Okay, so really, every year, or the PV you would need, the PV at age 65 to fund that, would be $425. Okay, or every year the person works here, the company's obligation at 65 increases by $21,425, right? And we essentially just did this math. We said after 35 years, what's our present value? So if we take that times 35 years, we get that same number, right? $749,000. Didn't work out perfectly because of a little bit of rounding, but we're very close, right? Okay. Do you see that now, Melanie? Are you with me there? That essentially, okay, but you did see the 21,425, right? Okay. So that was the cost. Essentially, that's what the employer knows they have to have put aside. So if this person worked there for 35 years, wouldn't it just be that times 35? Okay, so that's it. So every year that they're working there, that obligation on the employer increases by 21,425. Okay. Oh, I messed that up. Sorry, that should be, I just misread my calculator screen. Should be 749,862. Okay. I got 862 on the screen. When I did it with the decimals, it was that, Todd. Okay. I had my decimals back there. I did my multiplication. That was the right answer. All right. So, and it doesn't really matter. The $200 is not material anyways, right? That's not going to change anything. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, let's look at two different scenarios. So let's look at a 30-year-old employee. Okay, so do you agree that my 30-year-old employee who earns $80,000 is paying $7,626 to participate in the plan? Does everybody agree with that? Okay. What about a 50-year-old employee? What is a 50-year-old employee paying to participate in the plan? Paying exactly the same, right? That person is also paying $7,626 to participate. Okay. What's the cost to the employer for these two people? Is the cost to the employer the same? So that's what we need at 65, Sean, right? So for my 30-year-old, the employer or plan sponsor needs $21,425 in 35 years. Agreed? Just related to that 1 year. For my 50-year-old, the employer needs the same thing. But they need it in 15 years. There's 20 less years available to get to that promise for the 50-year-old. Everybody agree with that? So which of these employees would you rather have working for you? As far as the DB plan goes, the 30-year-old is going to be cheaper, aren't they? Okay. It's kind of the case, Bev, right? Same with your group benefits and so forth. Everything except for the mistakes they make, right? So it's just that, Todd, right? It's just a time value of money calculation. Okay. Now, let's look at the real cost. Can we look at the actual cost for the 30-year-old? And there's something more here. I think you're going to be a little bit surprised at how this works out. So what does it cost for the 30-year-old? Well, really what I have here is a TVM calculation where we're solving for a present value. We know we need 21,425 in 35 years. We're getting that 3% discount rate, and payment is 0. I know there will be payments next year, but the payment for next year is going to be for the service next year. Related to this year, we have to have that service fully funded, or else we end up with the Canada Post problem that Ryan talked about, where we don't have enough money to meet our obligations. Okay, are we all good here? So now I can go and solve this. Again, I'm going to do PY at 12, CY at 1, just so I'm consistent here. We're 35 years out into the future. We know we have to get to $21,425. That's our future value. We're going to have no payment. We're going to have 3 as our IY. So our present value here is $7,614. Okay, that's what's needed today to meet the pension promise. Okay. So, because the amount that they pay next year, Melanie, is for next year's service, right? So I can't have the employee come to work for me and say, okay, employee, you're going to work for me now, but I'm going to fund your pension next year, the year after, the year after, the year after, right? I have to put the money aside now, or else I have literally an underfunded pension. So, okay, so just ignore the 30-year-old for a second, okay? Can I use, what if I had a 64-year-old? Are you with me here?
Yeah, I guess my question is, obviously the employer is making a payment into this plan, right? So if we're trying to calculate what the present value of a future value is, I just don't get why we wouldn't put in the payment that they're making into the plan.
Are you talking about the payment they're making into the plan next year?
Just per year.
Okay, because the amount they put in next year is going to be related to that employee service when the employee is 31, right?
Yeah.
But that's not a payment relative to this promise, right? That's a payment for that next year of service. And then at 32, you're going to do the same thing, but that's the payment for that service at 32. And then at 33, you're going to do the same thing, but those are not, so payment is not the right word to use there, okay? That's funding the plan. But I can't, with this employee who's 30, I can't say, employee, you're going to come to work for me now, and you're going to have a pension, but I'm not going to pay for that pension yet.
Okay.
So go to my 64-year-old for a second, right? So if I have a 64-year-old who's retiring next year, if this is their only year of service, the employer is going to have $21,425. Agreed?
Yep.
Okay. So you're going to have to fund that all based on that 1 year of service.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How's that any different than for a 63-year-old or a 62-year-old or a 61-year-old?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm very confused about this payment thing.
But okay, I think you're thinking of payment as something else, right? Remember, a payment is a regular recurring amount related to the 21,425. There's never going to be another opportunity or another amount that goes in to fund that promise. Okay? Only the funds that go into the pension at employees age 30 can be used to meet that promise.
Right. And in that year, the employer is contributing to the pension for that 30-year-old, right?
Well, okay, so normally they would be, right? That would make sense. That would be intuitive, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but we know the employee, how much is the employee putting into the plan this year?
They're 9 and 11%.
Yeah, which totals up to,
The
see it just-
12 benefit entitlement, no, the benefit entitlement is how much they get per year, but their cost is 9 and 11%, which is the 7,626.
yeah, perfect, exactly. So that's what needs to go into the plan. Now, how much needed to go into the plan for it to be funded?
I don't know I don't understand the question.
That's the 7614, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the employee put in 7626, but the actuarial calculation said we actually only need 7614.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In fact, the employee by themselves is putting in more than enough to fund the plan. The employer here doesn't have to put anything in. Now, is that going to be different for my 50-year-old?
I don't know, but I think I just realized where my confusion was. For some reason, I read the ER needs X amount. What does it cost for the 30-year-old? So I thought we were doing the cost of the employer to fund it. But we're not doing that, right? We're solving for the cost of the employee.
No, that is, okay, so disregard employer or employee, okay? The 7614 is just what I have in green here. It doesn't matter who is putting the money in just yet. Mathematically, what we know is that we have to have 7614 in the plan today to meet the pension promise. That could come from the employer, it could come from the employee.
Okay.
Okay? It doesn't matter, right? Mathematically, it's the same thing. So then in this case, it just happens, we already did the math earlier, so it just happens that the employee is funding 7626, which is actually more than needed.
Mhm.
Which, remember I said, this is going to be a little counterintuitive. That's an unusual outcome, isn't it?
Mhm.
Okay. So the point that Robert raises here is, this is true to some extent, that when you have a pension plan like this, where you have this hefty funding obligation, it is true that we have typically the younger folks who are, to some extent, subsidizing the older folks, or the way you could look at it, Robert, is the younger folks are subsidizing their own future participation in the pension.
Why isn't the payment the 7626?
So that amount is only going in this year, right? If this person left at age 31, we wouldn't have 7626 again at 31, would we?
Mhm. Okay, I don't want to hold everybody else up because they probably understand it, so we can just move on.
I would think it's, well, I want to hear the questions, right? I don't mind questions. So, okay.
Is anyone else, just put Y in the comments, is anyone else struggling to understand this? Okay.
So, well, sorry, Todd, you can say you don't get it, but I'm curious. I do want to know who does and doesn't get it, right? I think some people are on the same page with me here. The point here, okay, just to go back, let's go back to the 21,425. This is where we started, right? Remember, every year that you're working here, the obligation grows by 21,425. Right? So if I have a person who does whatever 5 years of service, then I would say, well, at 65, we need 21,425 times 5. Or if there's 10 years of service, it'd be 21,425 times 10. Okay. So, okay. And do you agree that if we have 21,425 at age 65, that's enough to fund the 1248? So if I have the 2145, can I pay for the 1248?
Yes.
Okay. And that's the only promise that's relevant at age 30. Right? So at age 31, there will be another promise, right? A different promise. And we could do that calculation again at age 31. And then at age 32, there will be another promise, a different promise. That's where I don't use the payment, because the payment does not, the amount that goes in at 31 does not help to meet the obligation related to age 30. The amount that goes in age 32 doesn't help to meet the obligation at age 30, right? You have to be properly funded. If I have anything less than the present value of that 21,425, I have an underfunded pension plan. A pension plan that won't be able to meet its promises. So the present value of that 21,425 is the 7614. Okay.
So it's not a payment, it's what's required to fund the pension.
It is definitely not a payment. Yeah, the payment is definitely zero here.
So that's what I think people are confused. It's just because it's a future amount that you're using to fund the pension. You have to come to that calculation in order to pay that out at 65. I got it.
Okay. So now what's material here, and what I really need to get to, and this is something that does show up. This is something that shows up in practice for the folks on this call. So let's say this 30-year-old leaves the pension this year. Okay, so they're out. The 30-year-old is going to leave. They're going to be done with the pension. And their contributions are vested. So they get to keep everything that went into the plan. Well, what's going to happen here is they paid 7614. Sorry, 7626, okay? The obligation, the funding obligation was only 7614. they really paid more than their share, didn't they? I think, honestly, Melanie, you need to come back and tell me why the payment would be anything other than 0. What do you want to put in the payment?
In a payment, right, when we're doing these time value of money, and this is why the exams scare me so much, because when I think pension, I think payment. Who doesn't
Okay.
think payment either one way or another, whether you're paying into it or the employer is paying into it or you're receiving a payment, there's a payment of some
Okay,
sort.
so there is a payment here, just not on this line, right? The
Why
payment,
isn't it on that line? I really don't understand. I know you're saying this year versus last year and
okay.
can't, but that
So,
doesn't make sense.
so what amount is going to go into the plan at age 31 that's related to this year of service?
I'm not getting the multiple years thing. I really don't get it.
I'm not sure what the multiple years thing is, sorry.
Like 30 versus 31 versus 32. Like, I don't understand.
So do you agree? So I guess this is what I'm not sure what your gray area is here, because you do know that you have to have 21,425 at age 65.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know that that's going to fund a pension of 1248 a year, right?
Yeah.
That's a payment.
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely a payment.
Right.
Okay.
So then why isn't it a payment?
Because that's a payment on the line starting at age 65. Okay. So now I've got to figure out, so you know I don't need the 21,425 today, right?
Yeah.
I need the 21,425 in 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if I need 21,425 in 35 years, if I've invested 7614 today and I'm earning 3%, how much am I going to have in 35 years?
I get that, right? It's probably coming out to the 21,425.
Okay.
I understand that.
Okay. So then what amount do you perceive that would be going in next year, the year after, the year after, the year after, that would go into the payment spot?
I don't
What
know.
further money would be going into the pension or coming out of it if you want? What further money would be flowing one way or another over the
More
interval of
money would be
35
going
years?
into the pension, right? So you've got the 7626 going into it, or you have the 11 and the 9.
Okay, the 7626 is the 11 and the 9.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you have
that's
that going into it, right?
okay. That's true. At age 31, that employee is going to put another 7626 in, right?
Right.
Because at age 31, we're adding another $1,248 of pension promise.
And we're paying 7626 to do that, right?
Right. But I'm not, so then at that point, again, still that's not a payment. That's another present value calculation. So you're paying for another year of pension benefits.
Yeah, see, that's never going to work in my brain. You are paying 7626 into the plan every year. That's a fact, right? So I don't understand why that's not a payment.
Okay, but what if this person quits after today? What if they work here for 1 year and then quit?
Then they don't build an additional 1248 per year of pension.
Exactly right. So how much pension will they have if they work there for 1 year and then quit?
They will have 1248 per year.
Okay. So how much would be there at age 65 to fund that?
Wasn't that your 749?
That's the 74. That's 749 is to fund if you work there for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
The 21,425 is, that's this, right?
Well, you have it right there, 21,425 times 35 years, because you're talking about this 30-year-old being there for 35 years, right? So that's 749862.
Okay, that's if they work there for 35 years. If they only work there for 1 year, they're not going to get a 35-year pension.
Yeah. Did you not just ask me how much they would have if they were there for 35 years?
What I asked is, if they quit today, so they work there for 1 year, right?
Yeah.
How much has to be in there at age 65 to fund the promise?
Yeah, we already talked about this. 21,425.
Perfect. Okay, so if they work there for 1 year and they leave after that 1 year,
Yep.
is there any more money going into the plan?
Nope.
So the 7614 would meet the obligation, agreed?
Right.
Okay, that's really what you're doing. You're really treating each year as 1 year in isolation when you
Okay.
calculate your pension obligations. So it's not a payment calculation. You're not saying, how much am I paying this year? How much am I paying next year? How much am I paying the year after? You're saying, I worked there when I was 30. That's 1 year. Is that year funded?
Mm-hmm.
If I still work there at 31, I work there for another year. That's another year. Is that year funded?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. I'm
So
starting to grasp it.
yeah, so see, it's not a payment problem. It's really 35 or whatever number of present value calculations.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I know it's complicated, Melanie. That's why we're spending time on it. All right. So the just going back to my 30-year-old now, does everybody see my 30-year-old leaves the pension? They really paid too much, didn't they? They paid way too much to participate in this thing. Okay. Now there's a rule called the 50% rule. Okay. And the 50% rule says that the employer must pay, it might, Mark, it might, and I might come back to that in a second. The employer must pay at least half the cost of the pension. Now, that rule is only measured when an employee leaves. So we don't have to worry about that rule until this person leaves. Okay, so we know what the actual cost was. The actual cost was $7,614. Okay. Agreed? So I take the $7,614 times 50%. That's $3,807 is 50% or half the actual cost. The employee, however, paid significantly too much. So the employee paid $7,626, should have only paid $3,807, which would be the other half of the costs. So what we're going to do here, the employee doesn't lose anything for this. We're going to refund to the employee their $7,626 minus their $3,807. We're going to refund back to them their over contribution to the plan. Which is $3,819. That's good. And we have to do that. And it's done when they depart, Todd. So when they leave the plan, we're going to refund them back that. Okay. Now, as you work there longer and longer, it's less likely that that happens because as you get older, then the cost of having you on the plan increases.
But hold on, if you paid in 7626, or did the employer pay in half of that?
They didn't, so that's where you're notionally going to make that up when the employer gives you back that 3819 here.
Okay.
Okay. Now, where is that 3819 coming from? What kind of plan is it coming from? It's coming from within a pension, right? What happens when we take money out of a pension? Yeah, that's right, Robert. So what happens when we take money out of a pension? That's true, Cam. Cam's way ahead of me here. That's good. It's a taxable withdrawal. Yeah, it's taxed as income. Okay. However, what I would like to do is transfer it to an RSP. Okay. And the way we're going to transfer it to an RSP is we're actually going to give back some of your RSP room. So we say to the employee, hey, we took too much of your RSP room for your participation. We're going to have what's called a pension adjustment reversal, a PAR, which is going to allow you to transfer that 3819 to your RRSP. So it stays as registered money. You don't have any tax consequences associated with that. We just bounce it right into your RRSP. All right. And that's
who calculates the room that you have back in your RSP, or is that on a slip that you would receive?
The plan sponsor is going to give you the PAR on a slip.
Okay.
Okay. All right. The other 50%, Esther, essentially what happens here is sort of notionally in arrears, Esther, the employer kicks in their 3807. Okay. That's good. You don't really have to worry about it, but that's what happens. Okay. Is everybody good there? Melanie, that was the whole point of that painful exercise. Okay. All right. And it is really something you'll see for younger employees who leave defined benefit pension plans. Okay. Now, should we look at the cost for the 50-year-old? I think I warned you, Sean. I think I warned everybody. All right. I'm going to ask the same question here. Okay. What's the cost going to be for the 50-year-old? Okay, it's exactly true, Mark. So for the 50-year-old, okay, for the 50-year-old, now we're not using 35 years. We only have 15 years to get that money in place. That's right. So let's do that bit of math up. So we know we're still working with our PY and CY 12 and 1. We're now 15 years out into the future. We're at a 3% discount rate like we were a minute ago. Our future value is 21,425. Okay. Again, no payment, right? We're only doing the 1 year. We're saying, what does it cost to fund just that 1 year? And then we're going to compute our present value. So here, the cost for the 50-year-old is going to be $13,752. Okay. So yeah, significantly more. Now the 50-year-old is still paying just over half of their costs, but yeah, it's a big difference, Esther, right? The employer has a lot more burden on them here. And you can see that that's going to get more expensive with each passing year. Okay. So again, Melanie, I don't know if you're sick of hearing about this or not, but do you see that that's what's happening is you're really calculating each year in isolation. So I could have done that for 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. I could have figured each year's funding obligation on its own.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was most confusing to me that I could completely understand that 7614 times 3% for 35 years was 2145. That's super easy. I totally get that. But I was just like, why? Why do we not have a payment? But I get it now.
Okay, yeah, I get that. I totally understand that. I know why that's challenging. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Are we good with all that? Okay. So typically, Robert, we're looking, 100% funded is what you want. Okay. But typically, you're going to find pensions are seen to be reasonably healthy if they're in the 97 to 100% range. So essentially 97 to 100% is going to be considered sort of rounding error, or something that, market returns will smooth out, or whatever the case is. If you see pensions that are sub about that 97%, and we do give some allowance for market conditions and other events, but really, if you see something sub about 97%, that's where plan solvency does get to be a concern. There'd be a tiny reversal here, Sherry, just because if you do 13,752 times 50%, you still get just under $7,000. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely on the right track there, Sherry. Yeah. Your line of thinking is where it should be there. Yeah, yeah, it is, Robert. Yeah, you get that back into your RRSP. Yeah. Okay. So can I just show one more concept here, and then we'll call it a day. The next concept has no time value of money in it, so maybe we'll appreciate that. I don't know. Find it here. Here we go. Just while I have this up on the board. Okay. So now let's say that we do have our 57-year-old who is taking their commuted value. And when you take your commuted value, what we normally do is roll it over into a LIRA, a locked-in retirement account, or sometimes a locked-in RRSP. Okay, which is the same as an RRSP, except that you can't make any contributions, so you can't put any more money in, and there's no home buyer's plan or lifelong learning plan. It's locked in money, so you don't turn it into a RIF, you turn it into a LIF. Okay. So what we would like to do is to take that commuted value and convert it into your LIF. However, there's a rule here called the maximum tax deferred rollover. And what we're going to say, and this comes out of the Income Tax Act, this is Regulation 8517 of our Income Tax Act. What we're going to say here is at age 57, we're going to take your pension benefit times this factor. Yeah, this is very common today, Todd. Anybody who's dealt with a commuted value question would have seen this. This didn't used to be a concern. Nobody cared about this, 10 years ago, because commuted values were typically much lower. We didn't run into this barrier. But this provision of the Income Tax Act has been here forever and ever. So we know the benefit is going to be, we figured out the pension earlier was going to be $43,680. So we're going to take that times 10.5. Actually, I think we're going to be okay here. So we're going to take that times 10.5. Oh, sorry, 10.8. Okay. Yeah, we're going to be okay. I don't know what I did wrong here. This is unusual today. But anyways, we'll take that, 43,680 times 10.8. That gives us 471,000. Oh, no, I do have it wrong here. All right, $471,744. That's the maximum transfer to a lira. Okay, we're not going to be okay, not at all. And what that means is anything in excess of that is taxable. Okay, so here's what would really happen in this case. Exactly right, Mark. So what we would really do here is we would move the 471,744 to the lira, okay, which leaves, if you're tracking here, we said there's a commuted value of 591,948. That was my commuted value at age 57. Okay, so I subtract those two numbers. I got 471,744, so $120,000. $2,204. That's going to be my taxable amount. Now, if I have RRSP room, I can make an RRSP contribution. Some plan sponsors will allow a direct transfer into the RRSP, so they won't make you pay the tax on it, Todd. They'll let you roll it over. Some plan sponsors are going to say, no, we want nothing to do with that. We actually don't even trust that your notice of assessment is true as it concerns your RSP room. Maybe you made a big contribution on January 1st that we don't know about. So we're not going to allow the transfer. We're going to make you take the 120,204. You'll pay tax on it, and then you can put it into your RSP. Okay. Now, if there's no RSP room, Robert, you pay the tax, you take the hit. Yep. I think actually the chart now, Bev, doesn't show up until advanced curriculum. Okay. It might be in there. I don't remember, honestly, but you'll have it in the notes anyways. You'll have it in the notes. So yeah, RSP rollover may be available.
Yeah, I faced a problem with this.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I've seen both outcomes here.
So they got the after-tax dollars, and then they had room, so they put that into the RSP, but they still didn't get all the money back.
No, that's exactly how these things work. Very common today.
But
yeah, I pulled the 43,680 from right there. Okay. All right. So I do understand it, Mark, right? I do get this because your notice of assessment is wrong on the day it's printed, right? As soon as I start to make RRSP contributions, my notice of assessment is wrong. So I bring in the printed notice of assessment. It says that I have this much room, but what it doesn't say is, yeah, but I made a $20,000 RRSP contribution on January 1st of this year. So the plan sponsor is really taking it on good faith that the NOA is still accurate. Yeah, so the problem, Todd, is you have to know the age at which, but yeah, same problem. If it's a $70,000 pension, the problem just gets that much larger, right?
no, that was the portion that was paid out that had to be contributed to an RSP.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so here we had 120,000, right? It's ugly no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the difference, Sean, is that $120,000. You don't get a check for 120,000. It's an employment income, so the employer has to withhold taxes on that. So you don't get the full 120 in your pocket. You would be right if you didn't have an employer who had to, yeah, had to ding you with withholding taxes. Okay. Yeah, that's true, Shade. Now, okay, so what's going to happen with the 120 here? So Shade, I do have to roll the 471 into the lira. Okay, that's exactly how that works. That's the whole thing. It's all registered money. It's going to stay registered. Okay, the 120, if I don't want to put that into my RRSP, fine. I could just take the tax hit and then put it into non-reg investments or put it into my TFSA. Okay. Yeah, it's a true story, Mark, right? This is often going to put people into a very high tax bracket because you've got good income that year and you've got that big tax hit on that amount in excess of your maximum tax deferred transfer value. Okay.
That's why
Yeah.
you do the big RSP.
Yes, and that's why it's so much more painful when the employer won't let you do the RSP rollover, right?
Right. But in that year, you'll get a massive refund because you're going to be in the max tax bracket. Well, depending on your income, right? So
Honestly, Sean, if you want to stop people from commuting, you just tell them exactly what Ryan's client was told. Okay. You tell them no commuted values. Okay. And that is permitted. The plan sponsor is not under any legal obligation to allow everybody to take their commuted value. Okay. Yeah, essentially that's true, Bonnie. Yeah. It would depend on the timing and the amounts of income. You'd have to work through the whole thing. You might end up getting some refund, but it depends on how you made your contributions. All right. Yes, there are. So Melanie, you should be good for all the assignments in chapter 13 now. Okay. I believe that's true. Okay. Yeah, now in advanced curriculum, we're going to work a little bit more with commuted values, and we're going to do a little bit more math there, if you can believe it. But for now, that gets us where we have to be for both RSPs and pensions. Got a few more slides that we'll do next time we're together around pensions, but we certainly got through the bulk of it. We still have to talk about retiring out of the pension. We actually haven't talked about retirement at all yet. Okay, that's true, Mark. Just tell your plan members just to stay in their pensions, right? Okay. Sorry for going a little bit over time today, but I think it was good to get this concept wrapped up while we had this information readily available. Are there any last minute questions? We're going to talk about that next week, Todd. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Again, Melanie, you know I appreciate asking the question, right? Nothing bothers me so much as somebody sitting at home confused and not asking the question.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Yeah, okay. And
Okay,
I know
have a
it's
great
frustrating. I get that. All right. Okay. I've been married long enough to know how frustrating I can be. All right. That got a laugh. All right. Perfect. Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. And enjoy your studies. And like I said, you can do all of chapter 13. Okay. All right.